Hello there, boys and girls, and welcome to It's a Shaw Thing. I'm your host, Rob Shaw. We're talking fantasy football, and the strategy is very simple for this week. Don't panic. Don't panic. I know that some guys got off to slow starts. You drafted them in the early rounds. It's not that big a deal. Some guys take a little while before they get the wheels in motion. Good example, how about LaDainian Tomlinson? This is a guy who didn't even rack up 65 rushing yards in the first 3 games of the season last year. It takes some time. You're panicking about Joseph Adai. The guy took a hard hit from Chicago. He'll bounce back. He'll be all right. He missed some time. Only got 44 yards in that game. Don't worry. He's young. He's in his prime. Had good numbers last year. He'll be just fine. You're worried about Marcus Colston? How about this? The guy didn't even get as many as 75 receiving yards within the first 7 games of last year. Yeah, he still had over 1,200 yards on the season. He'll be just fine. Don't worry about the 26-yard stinker that he had in week 1. There's 15 more weeks to go. He'll be just fine. All right, now some other insight. As far as when you do panic, there are some cause for concern sometimes, and we're going to go over 3 different times when you should start saying, oh boy, maybe I'm in for a down year from this guy. Number 1, age. When you get older, it's a little more difficult to bounce back from injuries. Marvin Harrison last year is certainly a prime example of that. So on that note, who's one of those guys who might get banged up and, might not come back so quickly? Well, how about Joey Galloway? This guy's been great so far, especially in recent years, but, the clock is certainly going against him. So be wary of that. Also, Torrey Holt. I mean, the guy's been so good for so long, had great numbers last year, even though the touchdowns went down a little bit. But that's another guy who's getting up there in age, 32 years old. If he does get injured, it might take him some time to bounce back. All right, how about another issue they might need to overcome, and that is personnel. If you have some injuries on your team, it could impact the player that you have. Now, that means that let's say you have a guy on the Rams, such as Torrey Holt, and Drew Bennett now out for 6 weeks, and of course they got rid of Ike Bruce. There's not a decoy there. There's not that big second receiver. So on that note, Torrey Holt's value might go down. Mark Bulger's value might go down. Same situation in Seattle. Nate Burleson out with an injury. Matt Hasselbeck, not many options to throw to. His value will likely go down. All right, another situation to get worried about, change of place. Edgerrin James was a fantasy stud for many years in Indianapolis. He goes to the desert, and he hasn't been the same since. So be wary of that. Obviously, some guys go on, move to different places, and end up being just fine. Randy Moss is a prime example of that. Well, who moved and you should be a little concerned about? Ike Bruce, great example. I mean, this is a guy who's up there in age, and he's not the quickest guy, but he was able to make up for it a little bit on the turf, but on the natural grass in San Francisco, that could be a little harder to do. So on that note, his value might go down because of a change of scenery. Well, my friends, the main thing here is don't panic. We're just 1 week into the season. Your guys will be just fine. They'll bounce back if they're young, if they're in their prime, if they're stars, no injuries around them. Don't worry, just a bad week. We'll have many, many more. Well, my friends, that's all your fantasy insight for now. From opensports.com, I'm Rob Shaw.
So you think you can tackle a pro? There's only one way to find out. Click on fantasy at opensports.com.